You know perfectly well we don't have $394 million in cash.
Look, if you could get over some of the stereotypes presented in this movie, I would say that there's a lot to be learned. And by learn, I'm talking about the lessons from a business and a social perspective. Now, with this breakdown, I'm not going to go into all the lessons. I'm just going to go into some of the points that stood out to me from this film. So money isn't everything. Money is not everything is something that was said countless times by the Duke brothers, sometimes by Mortimer, and other times by Randolph. You dig? So earlier in the movie, money is not everything. Mother always said you were greedy. She meant it as a compliment. That just goes to show you the dynamic between these two brothers, man. They argue back and forth, and I can only imagine that this started in their childhood, just trying to vie for the affection of their mom. But it's something that is going to ultimately lead to their downfall if you continue with me throughout this video. Demonstration of greed. This was just hilarious to me. The $5 bonus that Randolph gave to their butler in this scene was just comical to me. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that Mortimer was like, yo, half of it came from me. It just had me rolling. Just goes to show you that these guys are just greedy on another level. Also, the whole concept of company policy. This is basically checks and balances that Louis Winthorpe was in charge of handling as the managing director for the firm. So he was supposed to make sure that the payroll matches the checks and that the amounts are correct, just to make sure that nobody is mishandling any funds, which is ironically a breadcrumb future embezzlement accusation by the Duke brothers, which is an interesting way of getting him out of his position and creating the opportunity for Billy Ray Valentine, who is the street hustler who runs into Louis Winthorpe on accident. Louis Winthorpe acts in a way that I found to be very interesting, acting like the guy was actually trying to rob him. But it led to this guy getting arrested. This guy I'm talking about is Billy Ray Valentine. And it leads to the formation of this idea by the Duke brothers to make a wager for this whole concept and argument of nature versus nurture. Meaning, if someone is raised a certain kind of way and it leads them to a life of crime, is it their environment? Is it their nurturing? Meaning that's what they was nurtured to do by their parents and society and by their teachers, or is it their nature? Meaning it's a part of their DNA, it's their genetic makeup, it's who they are, it's God's destiny for them. This was the argument that these guys was having, which I found to be something that has always been talked about throughout history. Now, when they say, are we going to do the same thing like we did before, meaning the Duke brothers having the same bet, that goes to show you that they knew what they were doing. This was something that was premeditated and it wasn't a mistake. They probably did this another time in the past, but you know, the film doesn't kind of go into detail. I found Louis Winthorpe's story summary to his girlfriend to be kind of interesting to me. It reminded me of the concept of peacocking. Basically, he was trying to make himself seem more brave and more tough by talking about how big he was in a situation when he wasn't even that type of dude and he didn't really do what he said he was doing. Even the butler knew he was capping. But it was an interesting scene to me, and just it goes to show you how, man, if you seem like you know what you was doing and you was really handling your business, even you could get laid. So following the arrest of Billy Ray Valentine, he finds himself in a holding tank arguing like a lot of people do in jail, arguing about a lot of different things and how big he was on the streets. He gets into a couple of scuffles, and before you know it, he finds himself bailed out, not knowing who bailed him out, but he just gets to walking and he gets approached by the Duke brothers, and the Duke brothers say, hey man, would you like to make some money? So you know, this guy's on the street, he doesn't have a lot of money, so he takes him up on an offer. I found it interesting that they call it a privately funded program to rehabilitate culturally disadvantaged people. What a description of their program, aka their $1 bet. But I found it interesting how he gets back to Louis Winthorpe's house, and you know, these guys not knowing what's going on. Eddie Murphy's character is not knowing what's going on. You know, he's in Winthorpe's house. Winthorpe's butler is running him a bath. He's singing. The Duke brothers are saying, what is he doing in there? And Randolph, talks about, hey, they're very musical people. Another stereotype. But man, I tell you, this movie was full of these stereotypes. I found it interesting that the Heritage Club had a sign that said, for liberty and justice for all, but it's members only. So it's, it's one of these things where it's like, I don't know, maybe at and pick up what they were putting down. On Billy Ray's first day on the job, he goes to an orientation where the Duke brothers go through the commodities business and explains what they do as being commodities brokers, explains what a commodity is and what a futures contract is, and explains that they've had a seat on exchange for over 100 years. And they go through the various examples of commodities like gold and frozen concentrated orange juice, wheat, pork bellies, etc. Now, while this is going on, Louis Winthorpe finds himself in jail trying to get bailed out. He eventually bails out and he runs into Ophelia, a prostitute paid by the Duke brothers operative Clarence Beeks to break up him and his fiance's relationship, which works to a T. Essentially homeless, jobless, and without his fiance, Winthorpe finds himself in a position that we classify nowadays as down bad. So he's so down bad that he has to get into a situation where he begs Ophelia for a place to stay, and she allows him to stay at her apartment so he could regain some of his footing and get back into a position where he could get on his feet and get back into the investment game. The retirement planning came through real strong, man, because I was like, man, she said she had $42,000 in T-bills as a 24-year-old prostitute. I was like, wow, she must be some hellified type of prostitute to get this kind of money. But as Billy Ray settles into his job where he replaces Winthorpe, he shows some promise by being able to help save the Duke brothers some money by giving them some logical advice on how they should proceed with the pork belly contracts that they wanted to offer to their customers, which Randolph aptly put the market price is set by Mr. Valentine. And this is an interesting callback to earlier in the film where I referenced these brothers always took different positions on being right in terms of money isn't everything. At first, Mortimer was the one that was saying, Randolph was the one that was saying that money isn't everything. But now Mortimer is the one that was saying that after he got proven wrong, that Billy Ray was able to provide some logic that was able to save them some money. And it kind of leaned the favor in terms of Randolph being more correctly about this whole nature versus nurture argument. But that's something that's going to be more fleshed out as we continue. The entrapment attempt by Mortimer was another example of, trying to win over Randolph to be on his side by, leaving his money clip behind and seeing what Billy Ray was going to do about it. And with Billy Ray doing the right thing, picking up the money clip and giving it and chasing the brothers back down and giving them back his money, it went to show that, when somebody's in a better position, they do have the capability to do the right thing. But I found that to be an interesting dynamic and an interesting observation in the film. And it demonstrated that, this is a lesson to be learned for sure. I just wonder how many times it took for Mortimer to catch that money clip without dropping it down to the floor, man. That was just hilarious. I was like, I knew he ain't catch that thing on one take. It had to take more than one take. Winthorpe realizes he has no friends when he visits the squash ball court and asks for some of his friends to serve as character witnesses at his trial, and to advance him a small loan so he could get back on his feet. But when they all deny him and his fiance has moved on, he really realizes that he's in a position where he has no friends and he has to get out here and do what he has to do. And by that, I'm talking about liquidating his assets. He didn't have anything but the clothes on his back and the watch that he had on his wrist, which was, a high ticket item, but he had to find a way to see if he could make some money. So he decided to go to a pawn shop and, pawn this watch, a watch that was a high ticket item that was worth tens of thousands of dollars. And he only ended up getting $50, man. It was an interesting reversal of fortunes to find himself in this position. So, Winthorpe, he finds himself in a position where he doesn't have a lot of power. So he resorts to crime, similar to what the theory of nature versus nurture kind of alludes to a certain degree. And he finds himself going back to the Duke and Duke brothers business and trying to plant drugs in Billy Ray's desk. And he's found out and when he really realizes that, he's not going to be able to pin this on Billy Ray, he pulls out a gun and he resorts to sticking everybody up until he could make his way out of the room. And he stands on a table and he waves the gun and he sees that everybody gets low and it's quiet. And I think that's probably the first time in this movie where he realizes that he has some type of power. since he found himself in this position where he lost his job and he lost his girlfriend and he lost his house. It goes to show you that some people could resort to crime when, they're deprived of resources and opportunities and due process. The climax of the movie is once the brothers realized that Randolph was the correct party in their wager, where they turned Billy Ray Valentine into a successful executive and they turned Winthorpe into a criminal who was deprived of opportunities and resorted to, violent tendencies. They both realized that, hey man, the bet is over and Randolph is the one who won the bet and the compensation is $1. I think that's the climax of the movie, because you get to realize that, man, this was a serious experiment and it was only for $1, but they was greedy and willing to do anything to win that dollar. But I think what they messed up at was, not really confirming, not really, going through policy and procedure and making sure that they do what's necessary to cover their bases. This was talked about earlier where we discussed the payroll incident with Winthorpe, and also where, they should have made sure that, Eddie Murphy's character, Billy Ray Valentine, was not in that stall. They should have really opened all the stalls to make sure, but that was their fault. And in their fault, they revealed that Clarence Beeks, the person that was not on their payroll but receiving, large amounts of money, was the person that was going to be able to, do something that was illicit, which is give them a crop report before it was released to the public that would allow them to make money in a ill-gotten kind of way. And I found it interesting, when they said, do you think we would let a you-know-what run our firm? I didn't think so. Neither would I. Interesting back and forth there. Winthorpe, with nothing to lose, decides to get drunk, wander around town, and to off himself. But to his benefit, things didn't go according to plan. As he heads back to Ophelia's apartment, Billy Ray Valentine is in hot pursuit, trying to get back in contact with him to let him know that he discovered the Duke's plans. And Billy Ray makes it just on time as Winthorpe positions himself to make a bad decision. He awakens to the comfortability of his bed, his butler Coleman by his side. He has this reflection where he goes back into his memory banks, where he says he thought he had this absurd nightmare where he lost everything and was all due to a you-know-what, which was hilarious. How he remembered that part. He didn't remember the Duke brothers part, but a physical struggle, or as we call these days, a little straightening. After he got his straightening, he found himself in a position where he was going to get physical. He was going to inflict some retribution on the Duke brothers by any means necessary, so to speak. But he got convinced out of it by Billy Ray, who interceded some reasoning, some logic in terms of dealing with rich people. You have to put them in a position where they're poor if you're going to really inflict some real justice. That was his reasoning, and it effectively worked once they both came to the understanding of this was something that was orchestrated by people that were in a powerful position, which was the Duke brothers. After watching TV, all three, Ophelia, Billy Ray, and Winthorpe, realized that Beeks was kind of the string that was being controlled by the Duke brothers to do, various tasks. And they realized that the Duke brothers was trying to corner the market by illegally obtaining the crop report before it was released to the public and artificially increase the price of orange juice to a level where they could control the market. After obtaining the exchange location between Mr. Beeks and the Duke brothers, the group decides to go to DC to intercept that report, and they end up switching out Beeks' suitcase with the correct crop report for another suitcase with the incorrect crop report. After Irish drinking, weed smoking Jamaican stereotype, in blackface I might add, in a bad German accent, Beeks discovers that Valentine was trying to switch out the suitcases with the crop report that he needs to deliver to the Duke brothers, and he decides to move them to another cart and to do something to get them out the paint, so to speak. And before he knows it, he's interrupted by a drunk passenger in a gorilla costume who he decides to yell at and get aggressive with, but not realizing that there is a gorilla behind him. And the gorilla hits him on the head. He gets incapacitated, and they take that costume from the drunk individual and put Beeks in it and puts him in the cage with the real gorilla. I'm not even sure how that's even possible, but I guess that's the comedy license that this film was given in the 80s. With Operation Secure the Bag, or, you know, if in this case, Secure the Crop Report, has been completed. Now it's crunch time. Now it's time to do what they intended to do, which was to make their bet, their $1 bet between Valentine and between Winthorpe. And this $1 bet is the one that really put these guys in a position to really hurt the Duke brothers. But before Valentine and Winthorpe head off to the exchange, they need some startup capital first. So they decide to go to the meetup location where the Duke brothers was expecting to have Beek's report. And instead of Beek showing up with the report, Valentine's character shows up from afar and slides the documents over, and they slide the money over, and they use that money that was supposed to go to Beeks' character for the ill-gotten share of those illegally obtained crop reports. They use that money combined with Ophelia's and Coleman's life savings to trade with. As the market opens at 102, other traders start to notice that the Duke brothers is trying to corner the market because their trader is purchasing everything, and he just keeps buying and keeps buying, which causes other traders to try to get in on the action, and it drives the price up from 102 all the way up into a market high of 142. And this is when Winthorpe and Valentine's character decides to start short selling, and they had a market high of 142. And you know, as the price starts to come down, the Duke brothers start to think, man, what's going on here? And as everybody gets silent for the announcement of the crop estimates, and the Department of Agriculture Secretary of Department of Agriculture reads off the results, they find out that, man, the crop season was better off than what was anticipated. Man, the price goes down, which is effectively a bad thing for the Duke brothers because they had a lot, and I mean a lot of money on the hook, as price went from an opening of 102 all the way down to a market close of 29. And as the $1 bet comes full circle, the Duke brothers are rendered financially ruined because the exchange representatives comes down and informs them that they have a margin call, which means that they have to settle all contracts at the end of the trading day. And they're not able to do that because they're over leveraged and they have a debt for $394 million, and they're ordered to relinquish all corporate, personal property, including their seat on the exchange, which has been there for over 100 years throughout their family's history of starting a firm. So they are financially ruined. The shock of the situation causes Randolph to pass out, and in true brotherly fashion, Mortimer steps up to the plate and shows everyone that he really cares about his brother, and he says this:
Mortimer, your brother's not well. We better call an ambulance.
Fuck him! Now you listen to me. I want trading reopened right now. Get those brokers back in here. Turn those machines back on. Turn those machines back on.